Welcome to The Social Capitalist with host and Never Eat Alone co-author Tal Raz. Social Capitalist events are sponsored programming of myGreenlight, an exclusive online learning platform for relationship development skills. For more information, visit our webpage at www.mygreenlight.com. Enjoy the event.
Hello, I'm Tal Raz, and this is the Social Capitalist Skills Series. Today, the art of carrying on effective conversations in live and digital communication. Our guest is former Peace Corps volunteer turned investment banker turned communication expert Jodi Glickman. She's the author of Great on the Job, What to Say, How to Say It, The Secrets of Getting Ahead. Welcome, Jodi.
Thank you so much. I'm thrilled to be here, Tal.
And as we are thrilled to have you. So tell us, you open the book, and others have commented on this, with a story about Warren Buffett to drive home the idea of communication's importance to career success. Can you tell us that story?
Sure. So Warren Buffett was addressing a group of business school students at Columbia Business School, and he was speaking with Bill Gates. So you've got your power duo up there in front of the room, and two of the most technically proficient geniuses, I would say, of our time from an investment standpoint and a technology standpoint. And one student raised his hand and asked Warren what his one piece of advice would be for the graduating MBA students. And Warren looked at him and said, right now, you are all sitting here in the audience. You are all $1 million asset, every single one of you. And I would pay 10% for the future earnings of each and every one of you. So if you're interested in that deal, come speak to me after class. I'll give you $100,000 right now. And everyone laughed. And he said, but if you want to increase that value by 50%, learn how to communicate. He said, you will increase your value by $500,000 if you just learn how to communicate at work, because communication is so important and it's not taught. And he went on to say, I went to Dale Carnegie to learn public speaking. But really, business is all about communication. It's not about discounted cash flows. It's not about understanding the financial mechanics behind a deal. It is about being able to close a deal and sell a deal and build relationships. So he said, if you're interested in that, see me after class. I'll give you $150,000. And it was to much applause and laughter. But it was so interesting to me to see that Warren Buffett, investor extraordinaire, someone who is thought of as highly analytical for the work he does investing in companies, acknowledged that the key ingredient to business success was actually communication, and the fact is it's not taught. And that was really a huge piece of the impetus for me in writing the book, was to think about, can we teach communication skills on a really micro level so that people who aren't great communicators can get their skill set where they need to be?
So talk about the flip side. That's the general theory of why it's so important. I'm wondering this unmet need, this lack of communication training has created some, and this is your word, horrifying results. And that's a very strong word, but I would love to hear about some of the specific examples or cases, maybe or hopefully drawn from your personal life, in which you've seen firsthand this horror and how it affects people.
Well, it affects people every day in that I think one of the interesting thing, when I was building the company and proposed this training to Harvard Business School, they said to me, are you really going to teach students how to say hello and goodbye on the phone? And I looked at them and I said, how many of you have ever picked up a phone from a prospective student and they didn't ask you if you had a moment to speak, or they didn't address you properly, or when they were getting off the phone, they didn't actually thank you for your time? And they created a really negative impression, and they ruined their candidacy. And the truth is, there are really simple things that people can do every day to make a positive impression in every conversation we have. And more with young people growing up with technology, with instant messaging, with email, with Twitter, with Facebook, people aren't as comfortable speaking live face-to-face and in person. So where has it blown up? It blows up in people's faces when they actually don't know how to go have a conversation with their boss and tell them that they screwed up, or they don't know how to go ask for help, or they don't know how to go tell someone that they're not getting any good assignments, and at the end of a summer internship they wind up without a job. So it's sort of this insidious thing where either you're a great communicator or you're not, but up until now there's never been a place to ask for help because let's be honest, if you're in your 20s or 30s and you don't know how to have that conversation with your boss that's so critical or don't know how to speak to a recruiter for the first time, there's really nowhere to go for help, right? It's not considered socially acceptable to go say to someone, hey, I have to go tell my boss I screwed up. Can you help me out?
All right, so let's...
Everyone knows how to do it.
So let's get a grounding. You write that 4 key themes run throughout almost all your work. Let's start with what these themes are and how people's understanding of them can help them become better communicators.
Great. So generosity is the first one, very in line with all of my Greenlight work and the social capitalist work. But the premise is think about making other people's lives better or easier. That is how you will get ahead in work and in life. When I call someone for the first time, the first question out of my mouth is, do you have a minute to speak? Am I catching you at a bad time? I never want to take anyone's time when it's not good for them. I'm always thinking about making things easier for them. When I'm going to my boss to see if she needs help with something, I'm not walking into her office and saying, hey, do you need help with anything? I'm going to her with 2 or 3 specific offers of how I can be helpful so that she doesn't have to think about putting me to work. I can say to her, Julie, would you like me to help draft the memo for next week's meeting, or would it be more helpful if I reviewed the model, the financial model that you're finishing up today? So generosity is not thinking about yourself, but thinking about how you make other people's lives easier, better from a team perspective, from a client perspective, for your boss, for example.
Mm-hmm. The second one is initiative.
Right. So you've got to take initiative. I think, Stephen Covey's second principle of highly effective people was, be proactive. But I talk about being strategically proactive. So take initiative, but know what the goal is. Know what you're working toward. If you are in a new job, you're a junior in an organization, think about creating opportunities for you to do something which I call the learn strategy. Give yourself a chance to learn new skills, to excel at areas you're good at, to assist others with work that may not be fun or interesting but needs to get done, to redirect work that is unwanted or not helping your cause, and or think about strategically getting involved by offering to work with specific people in your organization, by networking, offering to work on specific projects or with specific people. So if you're thinking about taking initiative, figure out which box it's checking. Is it allowing you to learn a new skill by offering to work on a project or get exposure to someone senior in your organization? Is it allowing you to excel and show off your skills, or is it allowing you just to assist others and show people that you're a team player, because there's a lot of value in that. So be strategically proactive and think about how you can make an impact on the organization and how you can help yourself get ahead as well.
Okay, the third is forward momentum.
So business is all about forward momentum, right? It is all about what have you done for me lately or what comes next. And you need to be keeping in mind, and again, this is very in line with Ferrazzi Greenlight methodology or philosophy. So one example I talk about is when I was in business school, I met a woman who was not connected. I was at Johnson School at Cornell, and I met a woman at a dinner one evening who wound up becoming the head of the Career Center at the Johnson School. But at the time I met her, she had no affiliation to the business school. I went and worked on Wall Street. I went to Goldman Sachs. I was an investment banker for 4 years, and she wound up coming in and running the Career Center, and she periodically needed help from me placing students on Wall Street. And I was always more than happy to give her advice, to talk to students. I had an interest in bringing Cornell students down to Goldman Sachs, and we maintained a relationship over 5, 6, 7 years. I had no agenda whatsoever. When I met her, there was nothing in sight that she could ever be helpful to me on. I was really helping her place students on Wall Street. And 7 years later, when I launched my business, she was the first call I made because she ran the Career Center at the Johnson School, and I said, I'm building out this product and this service. I want to come to present to the Johnson School students and talk to them about communicating live in a digital age. And she said, great, come on up. I did a presentation. It was a huge success, and she then subsequently made introductions to Harvard, Wharton, NYU, Kellogg, Indiana, all of my business school clients today. And so when I think about forward momentum, had I not nurtured and maintained that relationship over 7 years with no agenda in sight, I would not have had the same access to this launching pad to build my business. So when you meet people, keep them in your world. Think about being generous, how you can help them. At some point, the favor will be returned. It's the law of karma. The more good you do for others, the more good will come back to you.
Okay, and just generally keep the relationships have a certain currency, and you have to keep that moving, right?
Yeah, I even say when I hang up the phone with someone, it is never goodbye. It is thanks so much. I look forward to staying in touch. Thanks so much. I'll keep you posted. If I'm leaving a meeting, I'll come back to you with next steps. What else do you need from me to move the ball forward? I'm always thinking about next steps so the other person doesn't have to.
Is there a way? I think that's incredibly important. It ties into something that's fundamental to success, which we preach all the time, which is follow-up. Is there any helpful hints or tips around that? That little change that you're talking about, I think, could be critical, in which all of your communications end with some sort of, it becomes action oriented, and some sort of next action is the bridge to whatever next conversation. How do you teach that?
Well, it's interesting. So my husband struggles with that one. He was someone who came to me and said, I never know how to get off the phone, and I never know how to leave my boss's office. I always feel awkward. And it was so interesting to me because I looked at him and I said, forward momentum. It's always about forward momentum. So the way that I teach it is there's some low-hanging fruit that you can always use. If you're on a phone call, right, it's always easy to say, I look forward to staying in touch. I will keep you posted on the outcome, or please let me know if there's anything I can do for you to return the favor. Maybe they've been helping you. Those I think about as low-hanging fruit. The other thing is, if you don't know what that forward momentum is, it's thanks so much. This has been a really helpful conversation. I'll touch base with you in another, X period of time and see where things stand, or I will keep you posted as events progress. I'm always thinking about that give and take. Do I have information to share, or might I need something from you? Or maybe it is, thanks so much, this has been a great conversation. Would it be all right if I came back to you with any follow-up questions if I need it? Or I'll look forward to making an introduction on your behalf to so-and-so within the next few months. So to me, there's very seldom is there not a way to have forward momentum at the end of a conversation. If it is a corporate environment, then it is always the next steps. And if it is more of a sort of networking or social environment, it is typically look forward to staying in touch, hope I can return the favor, please let me know if there's anything I can do for you. Or the last one is, why don't I just send you my contact details, feel free to reach out to me if there's anything I can ever do for you. Just make that open offer.
That's great. So, to review, you've talked about generosity, you've talked about initiative, you've talked about forward momentum. The final one is transparency. How does that play into all of this?
I'm a big proponent of being honest always, and I know that one's not really a shocker. Everyone should be honest in business, although the lines sometimes get difficult to figure out, how transparent do I need to be. But I say that it is always better to acknowledge that you don't have information or you don't have an answer, and then commit to go get it. Go use that forward momentum. Go be proactive. So if I ask you a question that you don't know the answer to, I don't want you to lie. I don't want you to come up with something. I don't want you to make excuses. I want you to just say to me, you know what? Here's what I know. Here's what I don't know. Here's how I'll figure it out. Boom, boom, boom. Be transparent. Be honest. Go get the information. I care more about you being proactive and go getting the information than knowing the answers on the spot. Another example is, if there is a problem coming down the pipeline, no one likes surprises in business. Whether or not they are good or bad surprises, be transparent. Let me know up front. Give me advance notice. If you see that there is a problem coming down the pipeline, come to me as soon as you see that problem. Tell me there's a possibility of things going wrong and give me your potential solution. Don't wait until the 11th hour hoping you can sweep it under the rug. It will always come back to backfire.
Okay, great advice. So let's jump into some of the building blocks of incredibly effective one-on-one live conversation. Like the folks at Harvard, I'm interested in how you can improve the hello and goodbye of most people? How does one master such a thing?
It's so easy. So here's the one thing that I always say, and people hear it, and it is low-hanging fruit, and it is so simple, but I promise you this is life-changing for certain people. Your first question, the key question is always, do you have a minute to speak? I mean, think about from your perspective, Tal, how many times you have either picked up the phone or someone has walked into your office and they have launched into a monologue about something that you either have no time in, no interest in, or no ability to absorb at that moment. That conversation is never productive. That is never effective. So the best thing that you can do, I always say the introduction, it is the introduction, who you are, the purpose of your call or your visit, if it's a stop by in the office, and the key question, which is, do you have a minute to speak? Because if you catch me at a bad time, you're not going to achieve your that conversation. And I talk about when I am doing business development for my company, and I'm calling, potential new clients, and typically it is a warm introduction. Someone has referred me to someone, and I pick up the phone, and the first thing I will say is, hi, this is Jodi Glickman. I'm calling on behalf of Great on the Job. Richard Roberts suggested I contact you. Do you have a few minutes to speak? And I had an instance once with someone at NYU, and it was the decision maker picked up the phone directly. There was no gatekeeper in this case, and I was thrilled. And she said, you know what, Jodi, I'm actually headed to a meeting this minute. It is not a good time. Could you please call me back, or let me put you in touch with my colleague, Katie? And I said, thank you so much, and we hung up the phone, and I was dejected because here I had reached the decision maker, and I didn't get to pitch my product or my service at all. But I had made a good impression. I had asked her if she had a minute. She said no. And I thought, God, I hope it's not a lost cause. And the next day I got a call from Katie Wolf, the woman who she had referred me to, and we had a great conversation. But I always think about, what if I had just launched into my sales pitch, or said to her, I just need 2 minutes of your time. I come very highly recommended. Your students will love the product. She would have had a negative impression of me, and what are the chances she would have actually had her colleague follow up, and they're a client today? So I think of that one as just so easy, and I say all the time, whether it is your mom or sister or brother or boss, people call you and they don't ask if you have a minute to speak, and it's annoying and it's rude. So just do it for everyone, and it is game-changing.
We always hear about the importance of a certain skill of making the complex simple, and I often put forth a sort of slightly counterintuitive idea that, especially when it comes to teaching and doing what both of us do, that there is also a skill in putting forth the complexity, understanding the complexity of the simple. And some people, kind of just don't deal with that. And I think that's the ingenuity of one of the ingenuities of your book, is how you focus on something otherwise that we wouldn't focus on or deem unimportant, but then we realize that, in fact, this is a scenario or a situation that we deal with all the time. It occupies a massive percentage of our work life, and thus has a massive influence on how well we do. And so to understand kind of the real mechanics of it, rather than dismiss it as having none, is incredibly important. So, which is sort of a long-winded introduction to this next one, which I think could get dismissed but shouldn't, is this thing called the download, in which it's this simple task of sharing information with bosses or coworkers. And each of us see every day how in meetings or just in the informal kind of conversation, how the real stars of work can share that kind of information, new, old, and some of them come off as ingenious and novel and efficient, and others their whole style kind of demeans otherwise good work. So tell us about that.
Okay, well, and I'm thrilled you asked about that, because I do love the download, and I agree with you. Just to go back for a minute, the complexity. The point of Great on the Job is to break it down and say it's not complex. These strategies are simple, they are basic, and they can be learned, but they are powerful because they really do work. So the download, this is one of the biggest complaints I think people have in an office setting, is that They sit through meetings hour after hour and nothing gets done. Or John from accounting comes into their office and goes on and on and on for 10 minutes, and you have no idea what John is talking about. Everyone wants you to get to the point. The download is like high school English class. And the point is, you need to lead with the punchline. You need to tell me front and center what is new, different, or important. And if you don't have information that is new, different, or important, you probably don't need to be in my office talking to me. And if people think about their punchline first before speaking, right, give me the headline and then go into the supporting facts and details. Then talk about the action items, the next steps, the timing, the responsibility. But I want to know front and center what your headline is, because otherwise you lose me as a listener. It's the same way or the same reason in a newspaper article, for instance, you have the headline, which draws you in, and then you choose to follow and read and get the supporting details. When you are in a meeting, when you are on a conference call, when you are just having a one-on-one conversation, if you don't know what your punchline is, it's really frustrating for the listener to try and figure it out, and I always attribute that to generosity. When I think to myself about sharing information, it's what is the punchline? If I tell you it up front and center, I'm saving you time and I'm saving you energy because you don't have to sift through a 10-minute, monologue to understand what is really key or critical here.
The next, I'd say, principle that you talk about is be strategically proactive. This seems incredibly important because, if you really want to establish a good precedent when you're joining a new team or a new company, there are people who kind of wither and don't get acknowledged, and people make assumptions about them, and there are others who are more aggressive. Is this more than just being aggressive?
Yes, I don't think it's aggressive per se. I think it is strategic. I think it is what is your goal and objective? Are you trying to listen? I am of the belief that if you put your head down and you do good work, it is not enough. And I'm sorry for people who want to just be rewarded for good work. It's not enough. You need to build relationships. I mean, we all know business is about relationships. But you also have to think about strategically positioning yourself within your organization so that you show off your strengths and so that you are seen as a team player. And when you are new to an organization, you have a grace period. That is the best time for you to raise your hand and ask for assignments where you are going to be able to challenge yourself and stretch yourself and learn new skills. And if you screw up, people typically give you a free pass in the beginning. So not raising your hand and offering to work on projects or asking to be assigned to things where you know you've got a steep learning curve is not helping your cause. I went into investment banking and I had been a Peace Corps volunteer, for goodness sakes. I knew that the cards were stacked against me. And I went to my staffer and said, give me the hairiest, ugliest, most complicated financial transactions, because if I don't learn them fast, I run the risk of being labeled as, the Peace Corps volunteer whose technical skills aren't great. I was very strategic that I wanted to learn skills immediately. I also knew that I'm a great writer. And so while I was learning these new skills and struggling on some of my deal teams, I offered to work on an equity transaction where they needed someone to write a sales memo, and I knew I could knock it out of the park. So in my mind, I was balancing, where am I excelling, where am I showing I'm great, where am I making sure that I'm increasing the learning curve. The truth is, no one cares more about managing your career than you do. You can't expect your boss or your mentor or your manager to be making sure you get great assignments. It is your sole responsibility. And shame on you for not raising your hand and asking for them. If you are only working with 2 or 3 people in an organization, you see that you're siloed, you see that you are not interacting with the powers that be, then go figure out how to insert yourself. Go figure out how to start a brown bag lunch series so you get some visibility. Go let the R&D team know that you've got some capacity and you want to work with Peter or Luke because you know that they are either great at their job or they're well connected. You need to be taking stock of your organization and figure out how you can be adding value and improving your skill set.
There's another component of this, which I hope you address, which is if you are this person coming from the Peace Corps into Goldman Sachs and you're asking for the most complex strategic financial deals, there's going to be a huge learning curve, and you're going to need help. But oftentimes you see in corporate culture, other workplace cultures, that people can ask for help, but give off the impression of being needy or deficient or dumb. Is there a way that they can, especially in a new job when your impression is being formed, is there a way to ask for help, especially if you're going to be as aggressive as you're advocating, or strategically proactive, that will eliminate or kind of diminish the possibility of it giving off a negative impression?
Yes, absolutely. So there's two things you can do. Whether you are at the outset of an assignment, there's one strategy, and if you are halfway through and you're stuck, there's another. So let's talk about the first, and then we'll talk about the second. So Jane was a summer intern in undergrad who went to go work for IKEA over the summer in Sweden. And Jane walks into her boss's office on the first day, and he says, "Jane, welcome to IKEA. I want you to help out with this buzz metrics analysis that we're working on." And Jane says, "Great." He gives her a little bit of information, and Jane walks out of his office, and Jane has no idea what buzz metrics are. Now, I don't know what buzz metrics are. I don't work in marketing. Jane shot herself in the foot because she left the office without telling her boss she actually had no idea what the assignment was. And she was understandably intimidated and nervous. It was her first day on the job in a foreign country. But the way to ask for help at the outset of a project is 3 steps. It's 1, be proactive. Show me that you're enthusiastic and excited about the project. But be honest. Jodi, that sounds great. I'd love to work on buzz metrics. That's actually a new term for me. Could you define it? Or I've actually never worked on something like that. And then the 2 things you do, you ask for resources and guidance up front. Not what should I do, but do you have an example I can take a look at? Do you have a recommendation of someone I should speak with? Do you have an outline or a template in mind? Ask me to give you the resources so that you set yourself up for success. That shows you to be smart and thoughtful and have good judgment. That doesn't show you to be helpless. And then on the off chance that I actually don't have any resources or guidance to provide, then you go with Plan B, which is for interim steps or milestones. Jodi, thanks so much. Can you tell me a little bit more about what buzz metrics mean in this context? I explain it to you. Okay, great. Do you have an example of something someone's done recently? And I say no. Then your next course of action is, okay, I'd like to go take some time and outline my thoughts and come back to you with a first draft. Or why don't I start on a couple of key sections and come back to you and get your sign-off to make sure I'm moving in the right direction or to make sure we are on the same page. Don't go down the path of spending 2 weeks spinning your wheels on an assignment when you're not sure you're moving in the right direction. Keep your manager engaged. Ask to, provide some work product along the way so that you don't come back with a deliverable that's a disaster, because that will look far worse than you asking for guidance or resources up front.
Excellent. So let's move at this point on to digital communication. Starting with LinkedIn, I read a post of yours that said essentially that the emails LinkedIn sent its members, and you not only in email, but you can go on the site and find this, convey information about their members' network, such as who changed jobs and what people are doing. Mm-hmm. And that this kind of information is one of the best networking opportunities around. Can you talk to me about that opportunity and the steps you advise on how to exploit it?
Sure. So, and it's funny because I just got that email again for 2012, and it said, Jodi, 112 of your connections have changed jobs or have new positions in 2012. First of all, I thought that was amazing given this economy. People are changing jobs. People are getting new jobs. There are jobs out there. But the second thing is what that is market intelligence. And I talk a lot about TOUs, or thinking of yous, which would be the analogy to pinging, right, in never eat alone lingo. So when I see that someone has taken a new position or gotten a new job, for me it is a great opportunity to reach out and congratulate someone on their new role and stay on their radar. or it is a great opportunity to see where there are business development opportunities for my company and see where there maybe are new entreeways to a company that I've been trying to connect with, or a new line of business that I'm interested in. So when I look at that, when I get that email from LinkedIn, what it does is it gives me a great excuse to reach out to people, to reconnect with people, or to think about, continued opportunities. And when I talk about live conversation, I think all business is handled live. Make no mistake, sending someone an email is never going to, be the end all. But what it does is it opens the door to that line of communication. So, for instance, Jonathan, congratulations. I see that you've taken a new position with Fortune magazine. I've actually been writing for a couple of media outlets and would love to, connect, catch up, perhaps contribute an article to Fortune in 2012. It's a great opportunity for you to think about strategically, okay, are there ways for me to either be helpful to someone in their new role or to help advance my own cause professionally?
Right. So what are the other areas or kind of ideas around digital media and live communication that you want to emphasize?
Well, my thought is that digital communication is one piece of the puzzle, and social media is an amazing tool, but social media is one piece of the pie. And if you are connecting with someone on LinkedIn, if you are following someone on Twitter, if you are commenting on someone's blog post, that is the first step in the dance, if you will. It's almost like dating. Then the way that you continue to build that relationship is at some point take it offline and schedule a call or meet for coffee. Or a great example, actually, of how I came to know the Ferrazzi Greenlight team was Kabibi and I started exchanging emails. We connected on social media. We built a relationship online. Then we had our first call, and we loved each other and had a great time talking. And when I was in New York recently, I met with Sarah Grace, who is another woman part of your organization, and she and I had an in-person meeting that was great. But it was interesting to me, the relationship starts online, but then the way that you really make traction is by eventually meeting people in person or at least getting on the phone. So people think that, social media is the end-all, be-all, or the only thing you have to do. It's not enough just to connect with someone on Twitter or make that initial connection. That's great, but then take it into the real world and be able to go have a live conversation with someone. That is how you will build and cement a relationship.
I want to end on talking about our respective methodologies. It's always interesting, and you can always learn from hearing how other people approach some of the same ideas. One thing that I thought was interesting, especially among your four key themes, is you don't emphasize, as we do, vulnerability or even just the general idea of intimacy. Mm-hmm. You're mostly focused on effectiveness.
Yeah.
But I'm wondering if you're so focused on effectiveness, whether there can be some detriment down the road that you have all of these effective, efficient relationships and communications, and you're labeled, that person gets something done, but you don't get close to these people. And if you don't get close to them, that closeness, that intimacy leads to much, much higher levels of sort of, what you might call relational effectiveness. It leads to bigger business deals, more promotions, and so on. And that's how we view vulnerability. You're getting down onto a deeper level. How have you grappled with that idea? What is your take on it?
Well, it's interesting. I agree with you 100%, and it's interesting to me that going through the process of writing the book and teaching the course and, being a public speaker, I think that my default as a woman who went into the business world with not necessarily having the technical skills on my side, I probably veered away from highlighting my vulnerabilities, and I have learned over the years that it is extremely important. It's so interesting. I had a conversation with someone recently. You really can't like someone who doesn't have any vulnerability, right? Because there is something so put offish about that. The way that vulnerability manifests itself in my own life is through humor, is through self-deprecation when necessary. I'm very prone to laugh at myself, or I will get up in front of a room and I will tell people that I am a terrible banker, but I am a great communicator. So I'm starting from a level playing field, which is, hey, listen, I've got my own issues. Here's what I'm not good at. Now let's talk about what I'm great at, and let's help you get there. And vulnerability comes in now more than ever in the content that I teach. It just there hasn't been a name for it, and I think you raised a great point, which is there is, I think about ownership as another piece of the puzzle, right? Which is you need to take ownership for your own mistakes, for your own shortcomings, and when you do that, that is being vulnerable, and then people, can move past it. So I would agree with you. I just think that it was something I assumed. I think I didn't bring it out in my materials. I assumed people had it, but more and more now I talk about this theme of making people love you, and one of the ways you make people love you is by really connecting with them on a personal level, and vulnerability plays a big part in that.
No, but it also makes, when you give the context of your situation and the book, being a woman going into investment banking, it makes perfect sense that that's what you would focus on, and that that in years past the idea of women being vulnerable was a whole Pandora's box, opening up all kinds of different issues that you probably wanted to stay away from. I guess that's the test for whether we've really advanced in the next 20 to 50 years, is whether women won't feel that pressure to overcome certain stereotypes that have been projected on them.
And I wrote a blog post for Harvard Business Review called something to the effect that even though John Boehner cries at work, you cannot. And I got a lot of flack from that, from a lot of women, especially, and men. I don't think crying is appropriate in the workplace. That is just my viewpoint. I cry a lot, but I run to the bathroom or I get the hell out of my building. That is something I cry on the phone with my friends, with my mom. I rant. I just don't do it in front of my boss, God forbid. And that is an interesting, I think, just thinking about your perspective, where I sort of take a hardline view. I don't think that's appropriate in the workplace. Vulnerability is one thing. Breaking down and crying, I think, is just seen as a real weakness and a stereotype of women, and it just doesn't do anyone any good. But I've taken a lot of flack for that. So I agree with you. I think it is a different vantage point and coming from a different set of challenges to really establish yourself as credible, and then you have to choose somewhere along that continuum where you feel comfortable.
Well, thank you very much, Jodi. This has been a wonderfully communicated half hour in which you've shared some real gems. That'll do it for us. I want to thank you so much for joining us, and I hope we can do this actually again as both of our methodologies improve and we have these dialogues. To connect with Jodi and get more information about her and her book, go to www.greatonthejob.com. Is that right, Jodi? Is there anywhere else that you'd like people to connect with you?
Well, I am Twitter @GreatOnTheJob. I am LinkedIn, Jodi Glickman. I am Facebook.com, GreatOnTheJob. So, yes, you can find me everywhere. And Tal, it was an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much for having me.
Yes, and how are we going to end with some forward momentum now?
So forward momentum, yes. Let's think about doing another one. Let's think about ways that I can be helpful to the social capitalist community. And if anyone has any questions for me, please feel free to email me at Jodi Glickman. Sorry, that's not right. Jodi @greatonthejob.com, and that is JODI, and I will respond. I would love to hear from you.
That's great. Thank you. To connect with me about anything, you'll find me on Twitter @TalRaz. And there is no crying in workplace communication. So until next time, bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us. For transcripts of this program and a schedule of our upcoming events, please subscribe to our blog at blog.mygreenlight.com.